There's a reason why we left Braden Wilmus in the top 5.
Yeah.
There's a reason why we seem to be a little bit higher on Braden Wilmus than everybody else. I think there's an edge to him. I think there's like a nastiness. I think he's more athletic than people think.
Hello and welcome to the Verbal Commitment Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here as always with my good friend Ryan Wallace, and we're talking about the world of local recruiting from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. Every year before the start of the high school season, we give you our prospect rankings, and today is the rare double show. We'll talk about the top players not just in Kansas, but also give our list and discuss the top players in KCMO. So you won't want to miss that. As always, if you like what you're hearing, comment below, tell your friends about us, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us a review, a 5-star ranking, wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. We have our own specific audio channel through KCSN on Apple or Spotify, so you can seek us out there. Once again, we appreciate you guys helping us to grow and getting us in front of more people like you. We didn't have any players in the past week commit to play at Kansas, Kansas State, or Missouri. When somebody does commit, you can expect to find our analysis of those commitments right here on the show. Before we get into our Tacos for Life Metro Player of the Week, 24/7 Sports put out its initial top 100 rankings for the class of 2028, and a pair of local players made the cut. Blue Valley Northwest wide receiver Baron Marshall, who we've talked about extensively here on the show, came in at number 79, and Raytown South defensive lineman Zaire Thomas also earned top 100 mention as the number 95 player in the country, according to those rankings. Ryan, we've talked a little bit about how 2027 looks like a little bit of a weaker class, especially on the Kansas side, but we've already really seen players flash and start to emerge in that 2028 crop. What did you think of those selections?
Well, for Baron Marshall, zero surprise there. Like, I think that one's been coming for quite a while. Like you said, he's a guy that we've been talking about for the better part of a year now. Before he had even stepped foot on a varsity field, we were hearing about him, and Auburn had offered and several others. And now 6'3", closing in on 190. You've got the offer sheet from Auburn, Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa State, Miami, BYU, Missouri, K-State, Arkansas, Iowa, Tennessee, Wisconsin, and Ole Miss. So rightfully so, he is already stamped in 24/7 as a 4-star and the number 17 wide receiver in the country. And Kevin, we've talked about Baron quite a bit. I guess I shouldn't gloss over him that easily. I guess to throw it back to you just for some quick words on Baron, zero surprise, and at the same time, probably a kid that hasn't really had his coming out party, which is scary.
Yeah, when you look at the body, the basketball background, how great he is at change of direction and things like that for a taller receiver. I'm not sure that this is his peak, right? You know, when we look at where he could wind up in this class, it would not surprise me at all to see him continue to climb that list. You don't usually see freshmen, especially at a program as strong as Blue Valley Northwest, get out there and return kickoffs with all the athletes that they have there to choose from for the Huskies. The fact that he was out there the time that we saw him and was returning kicks, I think said a lot about him, in addition to the fact that he was out there balling out as a wide receiver. It just really indicated the type of wide receiver that he was and the type of athlete that he was.
Well, when we saw Blue Valley Northwest at the KC 7-on-7 Elite up at Mill Valley, Baron was out. He was there supporting his guys, but he and Aiden McGibney sat that one out. And yet at the same time, it sounds like they've got two capable quarterbacks. It's just kind of a matter of choosing which way they go. Good news is for either one of those quarterbacks and for Clint Ryder and that Huskies coaching staff, when you've got Baron Marshall on one side, you've got Aiden McGibney on another side, just throw the ball up. And I think that the Huskies will be in pretty good shape. For Zaire Thomas, though, 6'3", 240 pounds out of Raytown South. And this is a kid that we teased a little bit when we were talking about Dylan Hanks as one of our kind of prospect profile players a couple weeks ago. But I wanted to give some extensive time for fans that haven't turned on this tape Yeah, Team Fun Tape captain for 2028 already coming here. I mean, the stuff that he does, again, this is his true freshman tape at the varsity level starting for Raytown South. What you notice right away, I love that clip right there.
Yeah.
The acceleration, right? And the way that he pursues is just uncanny for a freshman. I think just how aggressive he is. That's what I wrote in my notes, is the aggression for a freshman, the acceleration at his size. Again, 6'3", 240. You see why Iowa State and Minnesota have already jumped in there. I'll be honest, Kevin, I'm a little surprised that some others haven't. I know he camped at Kansas or K-State in Missouri, and he's been up to Nebraska, I think, before. He's been to Kansas, I believe. I might be wrong on that, but still, there's some other schools that are aware of him, and maybe it's just a matter of, let's make sure that he's continuing to do this as a sophomore. I would be stunned if he doesn't. I think that he's just getting started. We said that about Barron. I think very much holds true for Zaire, and even then some. Here's what's scary to me about Zaire Thomas is he's where he's supposed to be, Kevin, in a lot of these clips. And I don't know if he's doing it like realizing that that's where he needs to be. He's doing everything just because he can get there. And so I start to watch his tape, and you imagine, what will he be able to do once he's diagnosing things, once he's fine-tuned in the mechanics and the fundamentals, once the game slows down. I actually watched his tape and found myself, I love that he's over pursuing. I love that there's times that he's like just kind of bull in a china shop, because as a freshman, you're used to seeing the guys that are wide-eyed and like, I don't want to be out of position and I don't want to make a mistake here. If you're Zaire Thomas and you've got the athleticism and you've got the frame to take guys on physically and get in the backfield with a motor, it's okay to me if, as a freshman, you're again over pursuing and you're maybe not doing everything technically sound, but you're able to make up for it. And you're at least just showing, I'm going to give it my all out here, and I'm going to have my motor running at 110%. Love that about Zaire Thomas. If you're an opponent, hate that about Zaire Thomas, because again, I think it goes to show sophomore, junior, senior season, as he comes into his own, as the game around him, starts to where he can kind of be Keanu Reeves in the Matrix, right? And everything slows down. That's a scary, scary thought here in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, make your mistakes at 100 miles an hour, right? And that's what every coach out there wants. You're not going to be perfect, but go out there and play with sort of that motor and ferocity. I got to be honest with you, Ryan, watching a little bit of the tape, particularly in preparation for tonight's show, some of the stuff you're talking about reminded me of a guy who came from the Kansas side of Kansas City and just recently popped up on the Freaks list, and that's Jaden Woods. And when we saw Jaden, the thing that popped was, okay, the pursuit, the athleticism, it's there, the motor, absolutely there. He has no idea how good he can be. And right. I remember us saying that about Jaden. I think when I saw him, I think against Shawnee Mission Northwest, maybe he was a sophomore, he had like a spin move for a sack and looked around like, did I do that? Was that legal? Like, was I actually able to pull that off? And obviously you saw Jaden polish up the package over the rest of his high school career. Really, really interested to see Zaire continue to polish that up and sort of take those next steps, because like you said, you can't teach the motor and the effort and everything he has at a young age to make those mistakes going that fast. And a lot of the things he did without really knowing what he was doing. Once he knows what he's doing, he's a guy that has a high ceiling ahead of him.
And it looks like he's got great length. So the question now is, at his age, is he eventually going to be 6'4", 6'5", 6'6"? Or does he say 6'3", but he still has great length? Is he 240? Are we looking at a guy that could be 270 with that type of get off in a couple years? I don't know. But top 15 already, number 13 D lineman in the country, again, according to 24/7 Sports, first top 100 for the class of 2028, 95th for Zaire Thomas. Like you said, 79th for Barron Marshall. It was great that we're seeing some local guys here, and I think you're spot on, Kevin. I think 2027 might see a little bit of a decline in terms of the elite. I think 2028 is shaping up to be really, really good. Our spreadsheet on 2028 is already incredibly deep. Let's just throw it out there. I don't mind kind of putting my stamp on it. I don't think these will be the only two guys when it's all said and done. And once 24/7 and Rivals expand into more of that kind of 300, 250 range, I would be surprised if you don't see at least one, if not several others from the Kansas City or Kansas area that are going to make their way in there.
Yeah, you're starting to see some of those guys already get Power 4 offers. And when that's the case this early after your freshman year, that usually means a lot more offers are yet to come. Let's go ahead and get into our Tacos for Life Player of the Week. Tacos for Life has a wide variety of options to choose from in their scratch kitchen and locations in 8 states, including right here in the Kansas City metro on both the Kansas side in Overland Park and the Missouri side in Blue Springs. And for every taco, rice bowl, salad, quesadilla, or nachos that you enjoy, a meal is donated to Feed My Starving Children on a meal-for-meal basis. Those meals are then shipped to more than 90 countries, to feeding centers, care points, orphanages, schools, and refugee camps. It's a great cause, and you can help just by doing what we all know and love, and that's chowing down on some great tacos. Every week, we'll pick a Tacos for Life Player of the Week, and this week, we picked Platte County star wide receiver Trace Baskerville. We love Rocco Marriott on the show. You'll be able to see just how much later on with our KCMO player rankings, and he has all kinds of talented targets to dole the ball out to. So, Ryan, what makes Trace Baskerville stand out?
Well, I love watching the maturation of a guy like Trace Baskerville. And I can remember, being around Epic 7 and kind of getting familiar with his father, Wayne, who's been at Platte County. I think he's been an assistant there for close to a decade, if not more than a decade now. And, again, kind of a figure on the 7-on-7 circuit. So you've seen Trace really grow up. And last year, he put it all together. When you see the junior tape, what I wrote in my notes is this is a reliable safety valve for Rocco Marriott who can embarrass you underneath or he can surprise you over the top like you're seeing right here. I just love that he's a when the first contact is made by a defender, the stop usually doesn't happen for that defender, as you're going to see in evidence by this clip, for another 5 to 10 yards downfield if they're lucky. Because in this clip, he goes all the way to the end zone and bounces around contact. Like, he lists himself at 5'10", maybe 180, but he plays a lot bigger and thicker, I guess I should say, Kevin. Great body control, high IQ, again, being a coach's son who's been an assistant at Platte County for so many years. You expect that, but, kind of a thicker version of Sterling Lockett for me. Another guy that was undersized, didn't have that kind of breakaway speed, but could carve you up with routes. Except, again, with Trace, he has an ability to break some contact too, and just a terrific all-purpose player that continues to be, like I said, a safety valve for that Platte County offense.
You look at in the NFL and you look at guys like Hunter Renfrow that just make defensive coordinators pull their hair out, because if it's 3rd and 3, you're pretty sure he's going to get the ball. You're pretty sure it's going to be 1 or 2 different ways that he's going to get the ball. And he just gets open anyway with his route running, with his quickness, changing direction. In this case, at least on the high school side, I feel like Trace gives you a lot more pop from a run after catch perspective. Not only is he going to catch the little 5-yard zig or whatever on 3rd and 3, but then he's going to make a guy miss, and then it's off to the races, and you better track him down. And so, Ryan, I really like that combination of the route running, and then, like you said, the run after catch ability, his body, the way that he's able to shake loose of tackles in the open field as well.
Yeah, I just think, we talk all the time about all the different types of weapons that Platte County has on offense for their disposal, specifically Rocco Marriott's disposal. And so you've got like a Jack Oots, right? And you've got, Brooks Hall and these guys that are able to be true safety valves, right? Of just bigger contested catch guys. You've got like a Braden Stevens and Adam Gisler, guys that are built for speed. But I could argue that Trace kind of is that, as you mentioned, kind of that perfect combination that can do a little bit of everything. And so that's why I just find him to be so valuable for the reigning state champs.
And here is our Tacos for Life Metro Player of the Week. Trace, welcome to the show.
What's up, guys? Thank you for having me.
Trace, you had over 1,000 yards receiving as Platte County went undefeated and won a state title. So my question is, what the heck can you do as a non-core?
It's definitely going to be hard to match. I think that's not really what we're striving for. We're kind of just planning to go out there. Treat every team like they're the state championship game and do what we do. Go out and try and win.
So Trace, what was it that made everything click last season for Platte County? It seemed like you guys were like a year ahead of schedule. You feel like that's something that can click again with this group?
Yeah, I do, especially just because our offense, which was most of what we're bringing back, we've kind of all been growing up together playing, so the chemistry's all kind of there, and I think it's definitely something we can bring in the next season for sure.
We talked just before you got on about Rocco having all kinds of different weapons in that offense. With yourself, Braden, Jack. What do you bring? Like what specifically is sort of, hey, this is what I do within this group, and this is what makes me dangerous.
I feel like for myself personally, a lot last year was kind of my ability to catch the ball and do things afterwards. I didn't really have as many downfield explosive plays as someone like Braden, but I felt like I was able to definitely turn a 5-yard route into a 25-yard catch. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. So I feel like that's kind of what I could bring to the table.
For your senior season, what can fans and coaches that have watched you before, where can they expect to see your biggest improvement? Where's your focus been this offseason?
My focus, outside of kind of rehab, it's really been a lot of, focus on playing my game faster. I feel like I kind of think too much when I'm running my routes and things, so it kind of slows me down sometimes. So that kind of stuff.
Obviously, you're in a spot where you can have a really big senior year and attract even more college attention than you have right now. Do you have any plans for any game day visits or anybody that you're looking forward to hearing from or you're enjoying talking to right now?
Planning on going up to Mo West. I was talking to a coach from South Dakota Mines today, and I don't have too many game days planned out as of yet, but we'll see as the season goes on.
Anytime you win a state championship, it's special, but how important, how unique and special is this particular season for you and your family? One more time to go out there with the Pirates, with your father on the sideline and with your younger brother, 2027, Carlos, the linebacker. How special is this for you guys to, really soak up this season?
It's definitely special for sure. Just being there for his and my first state championship, together, and how all of us could experience it. And I think this year is definitely going to be one to live up for sure.
Well, Trace, I feel like that's a good place to end off on that one. As our Metro Player of the Week, we'll be sending you and all of our future Tacos for Life Metro Player of the Week picks a gift card to enjoy the food at Tacos for Life.
Thank you guys so much again.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
I'm Brett Goodwin, one of the owners of The Learning Tree. The Learning Tree is a neighborhood toy store in Prairie Village, Kansas. This has been here in this location since 2000s, and my husband Alan and I purchased the store in 2023. Alan and I grew up in families where we've always wanted to have a business together. Alan grew up, for instance, his parents had a jewelry store. I worked in a local toy store here in Prairie Village when I was growing up. When this opportunity happened in 2023, we knew right away we wanted to contact them and pursue the store. We wouldn't have been able to get the store without the team at Emprise Bank. From the day we contacted them, they knew what we needed to do, which was very helpful. I would absolutely recommend the team at Emprise Bank to anyone looking to secure a business. We worked with Emprise from day one. They were extremely helpful. They were always great resources. We talk to them frequently. They know the area. They're very friendly. We know who we're going to talk with, and they know what we need to do. We hope we'll see you at the Learning Tree.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast. We're heading into our second season of the show, and in our first season, we ranked the top players in the state of Kansas and in KCMO heading into the high school season. I think we did a pretty good job. There weren't many major changes when we got to our postseason version of those same rankings. So let's go ahead and take a look at our top 10 players in the state of Kansas for 2026. And later in the show, we'll get to the Missouri side of the state line. So in Kansas, At number 1, we continue to have Manhattan defensive back J.J. Dunnigan at number 1. He's committed to Kansas at number 2, but really more like 1B to Dunnigan's 1A, and we'll get to that in a bit. It's Great Bend tight end Ian Premer, who's headed to Notre Dame. Number 3 is offensive lineman Max Robinson of Derby. He's the top-rated uncommitted prospect in the state. Number 4 is Mays South defensive end Hunter Higgins. Rounding out the top 5 is Lawrence Free State offensive tackle Braden Wilmus. Higgins is going to Kansas, Wilmus to Clemson. Number 6 is a spot we'll discuss a bit more in depth here, with us picking Lawrence High linebacker Josh Galbraith and a future college opponent in Mill Valley offensive guard LaMarcus Barber at number 7. Galbraith is another Kansas commitment. Barber is headed to play at Kansas State. And numbers 8, 9, and 10 are joining Dunnigan, Higgins, and Galbraith and Lawrence in offensive tackle Caden Snyder, Salina Central, Shawnee Heights wideout Tyron Parker, and Wichita Northwest Jalen Mason. We'll talk about Galbraith versus Barber, as that was one of the few sort of disagreements that Ryan and I had. But first, Ryan, let's talk about the race for number 1 between Dunnigan and Premer, because this thing is really tight, and I don't think we'll come to an actual decision until after we see both of them play in person this season.
Yeah, this has been on our to-do list for quite some time, is being able to see Ian Premer in, under the lights situation. We've seen him in action at camps and things like that. But again, being able to see him kind of in his comfort zone for Great Bend and being able to do a lot of the different stuff that Great Bend asks him to do, even play defense at times, right? Like that's something that we want to get a better idea. I think we feel very good about JJ Dunnigan because we've seen him so many times in so many different types of competitions. Like we feel like we've got a pretty good pulse of who JJ is, what he can be. Ian, I think there's still, I don't want to say a level of uncertainty, but just how certain are we that 1 and 2 is in the right order? So that's definitely something that, as we move into the fall, is definitely will be emphasized by the verbal commitment duo here.
I think when you look at this list, we were pretty much in similar spots for most of it. One of sort of the minor disagreements, however you want to put it, came at that number 6 spot, where I, kind of favored Josh Galbraith of Lawrence. You favored LaMarcus Barber. Ryan, I'll give you a chance to go first. Why LaMarcus Barber? He was a guy that obviously wasn't on our top 10 list previously, and we'll get to those lists here in a minute. But why has Barber made this kind of a leap?
Yeah, I was going to say here in a minute, we can flash up what our previous rankings for folks that want to see how things have changed. We did have our last rankings that we released right here that are a little bit desaturated, so that they're not the real thing anymore. This was back on January 17th, was it, for folks that are wondering when these came out for the state of Kansas, January 17th. And again, you'll see the one name that is in there now that was not last time is LaMarcus Barber, and he slid in there at number 7. I tried to make a push for him to get up to number 6. We felt really good about the top 5, but again, like you said, 6 and 7 between Galbraith and LaMarcus Barber was where things got a little dicey between you and I. I'm huge on Barber. If you go back and watch the January 17th show, I was kind of pushing for Barber to be in our top 10 at number 10 or number 9 back then. I just think he's taken the leaps and bounds physically and gotten his body ready. We're starting to hear more from folks that train with him and see him on an everyday basis about how much more comfortable he's gotten as a Mill Valley offensive lineman, as a major college prospect offensive lineman, the things that he's doing in terms of, again, the strength and the conditioning. And we've just seen him maul over and over and over again. We got to see it a little bit more in person, last fall, and doing it against Lee Summit North. We had Coach Gomez come on and he touted that game for LaMarcus. We've talked to Coach Appleby. He's very high on LaMarcus Barber. So I just think for me, what it boiled down to and why I lean Barber has nothing to do with K-State and KU.
Sure.
For me, it has to do with, I know what LaMarcus is. I feel safe with what he is now, what he's going to be. That's most likely going to be an offensive guard. He has some ability to be flexible, but at worst case scenario, he can be a damn good offensive guard in a perfect scheme like Kansas State's. The transition for me leaves less uncertainty for LaMarcus Barber as there could be with the transition that Josh Galbraith has to make, depending on how Coach Simpson and Kansas want to use him as a linebacker.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I think that when you look at the way that we see these guys, and a big part of the reason our rankings are different, I think, than other recruiting sites, and this isn't to throw shade, we see these guys in person, and we see them over an extended period of time. And so we make it a mission to be able to say, hey, we could be wrong on this, but we're going to have all the information that we can possibly have. And LaMarcus Barber, the information is trending up, right? I think when you look at where he was last year, it was pretty good. Where he's at this year, when you look at the changes he's made to his body, getting to see him in person here, fairly recently, there was a smoothness to him that I hadn't seen a year ago. And I thought he was pretty good a year ago, Ryan. But at the same time, I do think he's somebody that's trending upward and is taking the steps that you want to see. And I think that's part of the reason we try and see these guys in person is, one, if you just went and saw LaMarcus tomorrow, you wouldn't know where to stack him up versus where he was before and how he's sort of grown. And so to see that growth process. And so I'm really high on LaMarcus as well. Obviously, I thought LaMarcus should have been 7th, so we weren't very far off. Josh Galbraith is a guy to me that when you look at him, his ceiling is as high as anybody in this in-state class, and we like to look at a combination of both their ceiling, but also how likely are they to hit that ceiling, because it's not just your ceiling in a vacuum. If a guy has a really high ceiling, but he shows traits or there are reasons he's not going to get there, I think that's where you start to drop him a little bit. With Galbraith, he's one of the most athletic linebacker prospects in the country. And I've said that before. I'll say that again. When you look at the run jump athlete that Josh Galbraith is, and some of it shows up on tape, but not all of it, Ryan. And I get that that's part of the uncertainty, right? Is when you look at him, you do see sort of the cliffs and little bits of it. But this is a guy that is a supreme multi-sport athlete that can really, really run and jump and gives Kansas a level of athleticism at that linebacker position that it's really been looking to build over the next few years. And so, yeah, I do think Barber probably has a higher floor. Like you said, we know what he is. We know what he can be. I think Galbraith has the higher ceiling because I do think that he is a very uncommon athlete. And I don't think his recruiting ranking accurately reflects the type of athlete that he is at that position.
Would it be fair right now when we look at the top 10 that we've just updated here? When I think about our top 10 and where it stands right now, I feel pretty confident that 1 and 2, in whatever order we end up kind of solidifying those, they're not going anywhere. But I'll be honest, I think 3 to 10 and even down to maybe 12, 13 range could go a lot of different directions because as we look at, I think we have the graphic of the industry comparisons currently, where our new rankings are, where 24/7 Sports' current rankings are, and Rivals, which obviously is now on 3, but it's Rivals for high school. This is where things stand for all 3 of us as of right now. You see that, Arlie Morrell is in there for the other 2 and not us. You see, John Michael Fountain's name is still in there for 24/7 Sports. 24/7 Sports also is the only one that with Lawson McGraw. Rivals is the only one with Nate Sims. Like, there are a couple other names outside this top 10. We're the only one with Tyron Parker. I can let you talk about that in a minute, but I just think that, like, we like where our top 5 was, and that's why it remained unchanged from the last version. But, like, as you mentioned, LaMarcus Barber trending up, Caden Snyder for us trending up. He's put on weight. Like, he's already one of the most mobile and athletic linemen in this class. Now he's adding the weight. He's getting healthier. He's getting stronger. Like, Braden Wilmus isn't safe. Like, Hunter Higgins, I'm not sure is safe. Max Robinson might not be safe. This could still fluctuate quite a bit. And I'm curious your take on that. And maybe also for folks out there that are wondering, why are we the only ones that don't have Arlie Morrell and decided to stick with Tyron Parker?
Yeah, and he was just outside. He was in that discussion. We talked about Lawson McGraw being there, Arlie Morrell. I think Drake DeBon is a guy that's right outside of that range as well. You mentioned Nate Sims being in one of those sets of rankings. And so, yeah, you can go to 13 or 14 and find guys that, depending on the preference of the individual ranker, I think one of the things we really like about Tyron Parker is the ceiling there. With the length that he has pretty good speed. He runs pretty well for what his frame is. He's got really good feet. You saw him at K-State camp where they moved him over to cornerback. And if you've got feet to play cornerback, and he acquitted himself pretty well at cornerback at K-State camp, then you're going to have pretty good feet for a taller wide receiver. And so I do think that when you look at Tyron Parker's package, there's a reason that we're maybe a little bit higher on him. I love Arlie Morrell. I think Arlie Morrell is a guy that's being under-recruited right now that probably should have, more Power 4 offers. I think you're right there in that boat. We love Lawson McGraw. We've talked about Lawson McGraw a whole bunch on our show. We've had him on our show. And so I do think that's why we liked Tyron Parker in that spot. Before we get to KCMO, I do want to put you on the spot a bit. We've often seen a player from Kansas kind of hop up to a 4-star rating after their senior year. And with the depth of this group outside of the top 10, here's kind of a 2-pronged question for you. Who's your pick to become that 4-star? Right now, Premer, Dunnigan, Snyder, and Robinson have them on 24/7. And also, who's your pick for a player outside of that top 10 that you think is a stock up guy who could end up in our top 10 in the postseason?
Well, I think the easy answer for the second part for me is Lawson McGraw.
Yeah.
I think Arlie Morrell is a guy that I think has all the ability to be top 10 for us, but I think at the end of the day, it's just a little bit harder being at Pratt, and it's no disrespect to Pratt and that level, but it's harder to see like he's going to be able to make this transition fairly simple, or see him against a like defender. Unfortunately for a lot of those guys, like, you either see it in camp or you got to maybe wait and hope that there's somebody in their classification that kind of gives that offers that kind of opportunity on a random week or in the state bracket. I think Lawson will have more opportunities to show that in and around Kansas City. He's going to be featured quite a bit, I would imagine, on both sides of the football. So Lawson, to me, is the one that has the best shot at sneaking into the top 10. I shouldn't say sneaking, like, he's been sniffing it for a long time. When it comes to 4-stars, I know one that you're going to say, and I'm going to leave it there because I think it's a good pick too. There's a reason why we left Braden Wilmus in the top 5.
Yeah.
There's a reason why we seem to be a little bit higher on Braden Wilmus than everybody else. I think there's an edge to him. I think there's like a nastiness. I think he's more athletic than people think. He's got the Clemson thing out of the way. Like, he seems very happy and focused on his senior season. And we both think Free State's going to be pretty salty.
Yes.
I just think that everything the stage is set for Braden Wilmus to have a really, really strong year. And I think he's already been close enough to that 4-star range that he's not so far away that it's like unrealistic. Braden Wilmus would be a guy that I think has a shot at it.
I'm guessing you think my pick is coming from Mays South?
Yes.
Yeah, and that would be accurate. I make no secret of the fact that I think Hunter Higgins is a guy that's currently an 89. For those of you who don't know the way the ranking systems work, a 90 is a 4-star. So he's already butting up against that. And, oh, by the way, he played with a broken vertebrae a year ago. And so when you look at the tape of him as a junior, that's not the Hunter Higgins I think we'll see this year. And so with him being fully healthy this year, I think you're going to see his game take a step forward with the frame that he has and the legitimate verified size and all the things that he can do. I think that he's going to pop, and I do think that he's going to be a guy that winds up being a 4-star. I would think about Galbraith a little bit, except that again, a lot of the things that we know about Galbraith as an athlete are not necessarily going to make their way to the national recruiting guys that are making choices. And so I think that if it was a more common thing where, hey, they had watched Josh Galbraith play basketball, where they had seen some of the things that we have seen, I think it would be a little bit more of a possibility. But honestly, I really do think that when you look at it, I love the Wilmus choice, because I do think that Wilmus is a guy that's underranked a little bit right now for the frame, the athleticism, like you said, the edge that he plays with. But I think a healthy Hunter Higgins is kind of an easy pick, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if we look at this thing at the end of the year and he's that number 3, or Braden Wilmus is that number 3. And that's nothing against Max Robinson. I just think you're talking about an edge rusher, and you're talking about a left tackle potentially, versus a guy that's probably going to trend inside on the offensive line at the next level.
Well, and the only other thing I'll say in kind of conjunction to what you were talking about there, and maybe it's fair, maybe it's unfair a little bit, but like in some ways, and you and I have kind of been behind the scenes with how recruiting rankings work and everything, I wonder sometimes if maybe Lawson McGraw gets the advantage because he is kind of still being labeled as that athlete in terms of where K-State's going to use him. There's been some discussion of him starting at tight end. There's been some discussion of him. Maybe they'll start him at tight end, see and experiment a little bit on defense. Like, so when you see his senior tape and he's used all over the place, it's like, man, look at all these things he can do. That's great, because we think he's, an athlete and everything's open-ended. Whereas with Galbraith, if Lawrence chooses to use him, the new staff there chooses to use him like Clem Bowen did, he might do some stuff off the edge. He might do some stuff at middle linebacker. He's going to do some stuff at like in the slot out wide. But for, again, kind of maybe unfairly, it's like, well, KU's going to use him at linebacker.
Yeah.
And so some of that other stuff gets lost in the shuffle, or the ratings, they have a hard time like trying to understand and compartmentalize all that. So again, I think it bodes better for Lawson in a kind of an unfair sense than it would a Josh Galbraith. The other thing for Hunter Higgins that might be in your favor is knowing what they have to replace on offense with no more Tate McNew and some of those guys. Unfortunately for Hunter, he might be on the field quite a bit, but that's a good thing. More Tate, more opportunity for him to try and get into that 4-star status.
Absolutely. We will have a similar discussion and get into our top 10 in Kansas City, Missouri when we get back right after this.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
This is the Verbal Commitment Podcast on KCSN. You can follow us on Twitter at verbalcommit_KC. Follow Ryan at _Ryan Wallace, or myself at Flaherty KCSN. I mention all that so you guys can give us your thoughts either down below in the comments here, or let us know what you agree with, what you don't. In the last segment, we gave our top 10 for the state of Kansas. Let's jump to KCMO. At number 1, we have Ronell Johnson from Blue Springs, who put in one of the most dominant single-player performances we saw a year ago. He's committed to Indiana. Hot on his heels is Oklahoma running back commitment Zephan Walker, who should have a huge year at Ray-Pac. James Madison commit Rocco Marriott, the quarterback at Platte County, is our number 3, with his tight end teammate Jack Oots, a Kansas commitment, at number 4. He could battle for his spot in the rankings with another tight end and a future teammate in Rockhurst, Kevin Sullivan, who's also committed to Kansas and comes in at number 5. Blue Springs South quarterback, Aiden Wilhelm, is one of the more dynamic athletes in the region. Quarterback is heading to Rice. At number 7 is a guy we're fascinated to watch develop in Liberty North wide receiver and DB Trishun Neal. He's uncommitted. Liberty offensive lineman Jonathan Percy comes in at number 8, with St. Pius linebacker Mason Wright At number 9, they're both going to Wyoming. And at number 10 is Park Hill defensive lineman Jonah Ware, who is starting to collect some Power 4 offers. Wake Forest stepped forward at the end of July, and it will be fun to continue to follow his recruitment. Like before, Ryan, let's go ahead and talk about that race for number 1. Is this a situation where you think Dzefin Walker, who has been on our radars, for years,
since he was a freshman,
could overtake Ronell Johnson?
I think it's possible, but I also think that it would take a little bit of both, right? Like it would have to take a strong season from Dzefin and maybe kind of a fall back to earth from Ronell Johnson, just because we've talked ad nauseum about the times that we've been able to see Ronell in person, what shows up on tape, the fact that he can play 2 different kind of roles on the defensive line. And he just continues to improve. Like he continues to get a little bit more agile, get a little bit more kind of the jet burst off the edge at times when he's just kind of sent on a blitz, which is rare, but it's there. Like I think that ability for him at Blue Springs is there this season, with the defense they have returning, for him to do a little bit of everything. So again, he would have to look very uncomfortable, I think, and Dzefin would have to really show out, which again, with Coach Jones showing up on the scene at Ray-Pac, it's very possible Dzefin gets back to kind of the Dzefin that we all expected. Right. Like that could very well happen, but I think it's going to have to take both of those things happening.
The battle for the top tight end in KCMO is a heated one with Oots and Sullivan, and they bring different things to Kansas, and so they can kind of coexist together there. But I actually wanted to talk really briefly about Platte County quarterback Rocco Marriott, because I know after we've had a chance to see him in person, he's a guy that we think is underrated both from a recruiting site standpoint as well as from an offer standpoint.
Well, I was going to say, you were talking about like, could Ronell get overtaken by Dzefin and that sort of thing? I feel like number 1 will probably lean one of those 2 ways. And again, I feel pretty strongly that it would take a lot for Ronell to get knocked out of that for the both of us. I'm not so sure that Dzefin can be knocked out by Rocco Marriott.
Sure.
We're that high on him. If he takes, again, knowing where he was as a sophomore, knowing where he jumped to a junior, if that goes up even more or continues kind of on that type of trajectory into his senior season, I don't care if he's committed to James Madison or Alaska State, or wherever. Like we are going to judge you on the player that we believe you to be. And we believe Rocco Marriott to be very, very, very stinking good. So I would say right now, we're very, very happy with him at 3, but I talked about it with Kansas. Like it could fluctuate. I think with Missouri, if you look at our rankings from when did we release them? February 14th, nothing changed in the top 7.
Yep.
That's also not to say that any of those guys are even as stable maybe as they are on the Kansas side. Like there's a lot of fluctuation here within the top 10 and maybe even a deeper list outside of the top 10 that we could go kind of pick and draw from that could end up in the top 10 right now. But again, to finish on Rocco, like he's 3 now, he was 3 before on February 14th. He could very well creep up to possibly 2 when it's all said and done. There you go. You see that from February 14th. Top 7 did not change, Kevin. And we thought long and hard about it. There was some, but we just kind of feel like right now, until we see some of these guys' senior tape, we feel like we're pretty confident, kind of nailed it, at least from 1 to 7 so far.
Rocco may be the favorite to win the Simone Award, and if he were to commit to Alaska State, no offense to James Madison, would be the first Alaska State commitment, I think, to win the Simone. But moving into the back half of the top 10, Ryan, let's talk about one of your favorites here, in Treshundon Neal. He's a lengthy athlete, and I want to ask you this question: where is he better, offense or defense, and could he play both in college? Not at the same time necessarily, but like, could he play either, I should say, in college?
Okay, so this is interesting. Again, all full clarity, full honesty here. Treshundon Neal was a name that we saw at 7-on-7 in like March.
Yep.
And he was phenomenal as a wide receiver. Like looked
Really
really good, looked every bit the part, right? And we were like, well, we still really like him as a corner, but I think that just goes to show the ball skills and everything. But we still hadn't really seen a whole lot from him. And then Destroying shows up, right? On the scene last weekend here in Kansas City. He's, I think, a viral streamer or something. And there's Treshundon Neal in these kind of white shorts. And these clips aren't great. He's not going to make every interception. He's not going to make every catch. As you see here, he slips against his coach, Dom Jacinto, one of his trainers, as he's a wide receiver. But he's in place to make plays in every one of those clips. And so I say that, and people are going to go, wow, you guys are rating people based on what you saw in an on-air, like, Twitch stream thing. First off, we're always watching. So we're not always judging you from these events, but we're always watching. Like, we try and keep a good pulse on the city. And so when I saw Treshundon show up in those clips, I was encouraged because I think you get to see bits and pieces of what he can be as a corner, but we're also starting to see what he can be as a receiver. He's huge. I mean, you see the length, like he's every bit of like 6'2" and plays like he's freaking 6'7". There's just so many little things we love to rate based on floor and ceiling. I think his floor right now is probably higher as a receiver. But I think the ceiling might still be higher for a guy to be that kind of Tariq Woolen style frame guy, this Richard Sherman type guy as a corner. There is some fine tuning. There is some polishing there. But in every one of those clips, he doesn't make the play, but like the ball control at his body size is all there. It's crazy to me, Kevin, that he's not more well thought of around the recruiting industry and hasn't collected more offers, because I think all the tools are there and we continue to see it like we saw it last weekend at Lee Summit North.
Absolutely. How about Jonathan Percy as a guy who saw his recruiting kind of take off as schools made their way over to Liberty in this offseason?
Yeah, so Jonathan Percy was a guy, again, back on February 14th, I went back and re-listened, rewatched. He was a guy that we threw out would be in contention for the top 10 the next time we did a rankings kind of revision. And Braylon Agee, Armon Weathers, we saw some things. It's still solid. They're right there outside the top 10. But Jonathan Percy earned his way onto this list. And I thought jumped Mason Wright for me all the way up to number 8 as our highest ranked offensive lineman on the Missouri side. Because again, similar to what I was saying about LaMarcus Barber, Jonathan Percy is what he is, and then some. What his tape doesn't show, and I plucked a couple clips here, is that like he's mobile and he's athletic. He's a better athlete than we gave him credit for initially. And then maybe even some of these clips show. Like he's playing basketball and you see the nimble feet. He's playing baseball and he's at first base and he's rounding bases and like running like a gazelle at 300 plus pounds. He's strong. He's violent. So we already like that side of him. And then over the offseason, we discovered this other level of athlete with him. And having watched him at the K-State offensive line, defensive line, elite camp, did he struggle at times when they had him kind of out as an anchor, as a tackle? Yeah, that's not where he's going to play in college. Jonathan Percy is going to be a hell of a center and offensive guard one day. And so, again, that's where you and I found confidence in the stability of what he is now, what he's going to be, the fit at Wyoming. The transition is going to be pretty swift, I would imagine, for a kid like him. So that's why we saw him and we were confident in taking the leap to get him from kind of outside our top 10 up to number 8.
Really like the guys right after him too. When you look at Mason Wright and Jonah Weir, who I think is tremendous, and really like the way that he moves for a guy of his size. But this is another group like the Kansas group, Ryan, where there are some guys on the periphery of that top 10 that we really like as well. Is there anybody specific that you think, hey, this person is a real threat to jump into the top 10 by year's end?
Well, I mean, I think Armand Weathers could jump back in there because we were so high on him the first go round. Braylon Agee another guy that I think could jump right in there. Blue Spring South has a ton of guys. They might have one of the more loaded rosters that we've seen, at least so far. Excited to get to meet some of those guys here this weekend at Media Day. But, you were high on Blaine Marshall. We talked about he was the MVP at the varsity combines. He's primed for a major season. Gary Hill Jr. is a guy that we really like, that I think could again assert himself maybe in a way that we were expecting last year and saw flashes of, but maybe there's a level of consistency there. Kind of scrolling down our list, I'm trying to kind of refresh myself here and just see if there's anybody else that is really like that I'm missing that is a standout player. Park Hill's got a couple. We mentioned Jonah Weir and we mentioned Braylon Agee was in there before. Is a guy like Dante Dixon and DJ Bronson on defense impress enough? They're going to get a lot of targets. Maybe somebody there. The other guy that I want to talk about, though, now that I'm seeing it, is a guy that I highlighted a while back that I think still just needed a little bit more room to grow physically and mature. It sounds like that's starting to be done, or at least the last I'd heard this offseason. We'll see kind of if he can kind of hold on to some of that weight and that strength as we get through the season. And guys typically kind of shed some of that through just wear and tear and the grind. But that's going to be Cale Bunce at Platte County.
Yep.
Just because he already has the frame at 6'5", I think he's pushing like getting up near 215, 220, if last I heard was correct. I really liked his tape the first go around. And again, he's got the type of intangibles and measurements that are kind of what you're looking for the top 10. And so Platte County is going to have a ton of opportunities. We expect that they'll go far in a bracket. That means a lot of film, a lot of chances for us to really get a good grip on who he is. So he would be another name in a long-winded answer here that I think could really creep into the top 10, where we weren't really thinking about him in that way in February, and we might really be thinking of him in that way as early as late September, early October.
A few guys that kind of jump out going through the same list that you were. When I got out to North Kansas City, I was really impressed by Romy Still. He's a guy that I think has some, potential two-way stuff where you could play him on either side. And I think his ceiling as an offensive lineman will make him somebody for us to watch this year. Another guy that we have featured previously, talking about Jermaine Collins at St. Joe Central.
Yeah.
I think is a really good athlete at that linebacker position, which makes him interesting. And then a guy that you kind of turned me on to a little bit that I had a chance to see in person, Draven Colvin at Staley. When you look at jumbo athletes and sort of what he's able to do at his size, he's another guy that I'm going to be really keeping an eye on this year as somebody that could be, sort of in that 11 to 20 type group and potentially move up a little bit with a big season.
And you get to see him play. We expect at least anticipate to see him a little bit more at linebacker, which I think would be great in terms of kind of gauging his recruiting profile a little bit. The wide receivers, I think Roger Haney, the fourth, is a guy that we've talked about before on the show as another potential guy that could get up there. And here's two guys that we haven't mentioned on the show, and maybe I'm spoiling future prospect profiles to come. But this is kind of an intriguing group on the Missouri side at quarterback, because all the praise and the hype, rightfully so, has gone to a Rocco Marriott, and we love him. At the same time, I don't think maybe we talk enough about the career that Hudson Bailey has had at St. Pius. And he's got a chance to really go out with a huge finale this season as a senior. And then Peyton Steffen at Smithville is a guy that I've started to kind of, you find yourself returning to tape sometimes as kind of a precursor to senior seasons and what's in store. And what you see out of the Smithville player, the more times I come back is stuff that I like. And so it's just might be a matter of turning on those first 3 or 4 tapes. Maybe there's a chance in the playoffs that we get to see Smithville in action, or maybe a regular season game like against Black County would be awesome. But, there's some quarterbacks. Maybe they're not top 10 yet, but and when you talk about position battles and some guys that don't get enough credit that are very, very good players, those 2 guys have started to come to mind as we near the season.
Well, I'm glad you said that. The high school season is nearly upon us. And next week, actually, we will be breaking down some of the area's top teams and making some picks. So just another little something to look forward to for those of you who really enjoy, football in Kansas and KCMO. So that should do it for this week's episode of the Verbal Commitment Podcast on KCSN. Thanks for following along. If you enjoyed what you saw or heard, leave us a comment or review, like this video, subscribe here on YouTube, or hit us with a 5-star rating if you're listening on an audio platform. And until next time, we'll see you on the trail, and take care.